Chapter 11. Why Foxfire Refused Mushroom. When they were safe, Foxfire cried out with actual tears. She was still holding on to the honeycomb treasures, but she had red welts all across her face and arms. Though she was less pretty, Alexander still felt as sympathetic as he would have otherwise. That's how he knew he liked her for real. He pulled out the magical mushroom from his knapsack and offered it to her. "What is this?" She looked with disgust at the nasty vegetable fungus. "I'm not sure what mushrooms are, besides being gross." "It's a mushroom," he explained. "Yes, I can see that," she chastised him impatiently, "but why are you offering me it?" "It is a magical mushroom that can heal wounds and cure poisons. Take it. It can make your welts better." She stared at him. "Okay," she refused. "I don't believe you," she admitted. "But even if that mushroom is magical, why would you waste such amazing power on bee stings?" "They are your bee stings," he also admitted, and even though he was honest, and even though he was sweet, she scowled at him. "That's stupid," she said, and then she began to take some of the honey from the honeycomb and dab it on her welts. She even got the ones on her face without missing, probably because the pain betrayed their location. He put the mushroom away. "Besides," she said casually, hoping it sounded impressive, "I'm not a wimp." Except they were speaking Italian, so the words sort of meant something else. But since I don't know Italian, wimp will have to do. And he was impressed. Chapter 12. The Fight Between the Wolves and the Fox. They were walking through the new woods now, and trying to be very quiet. But soon they heard the howling of wolves, and they stopped moving at all. But wolves smell a lot better than they can hear, so it was already too late. The wolves came at them from 3 directions: behind them, in front of them, and to the left of them. This was the reason that Alexander ended up running to the right. But Foxfire would not leave her furry friend, so she was left behind. A wolf, probably the alpha, leapt towards Alexander because he was the closest. But Trix, who is much smaller than the wolf and reminds me of a stuffed animal, caught the wolf's tail in her mouth and clamped down. The wolf's focus went from what was directly in front of her to what was directly behind her, and it was in that moment that Alexander went to the right. We shouldn't blame him for leaving them. He really did think Foxfire was right behind him. Actually, it was a wolf. Another wolf, probably the beta or a beta, lunged towards Foxfire, but she dropped to the ground and rolled away. Trix dropped the tail that was in her mouth, dodged a scary claw from the alpha, and hit the beta with his foxy head. The wolf, amazingly, fell over and scrambled to get up. But then the alpha was on the fox, and he, who was the wolf, bit Trix so hard that it drew blood. And Trix cried out, and there might have been tears or not, but there was definitely blood. Another wolf lunged towards Foxfire, and she timed her fist just right and thrust it against the wolf's jaw. And even though her hand hurt even worse than when she was stung by bees, the wolf also hurt a lot, and so it ran away. And there were still 3 wolves. Alexander had made it quite a distance with the wolf chasing him, but wolves are faster than human beings, so it lunged with its mouth and bit into his leg. But because his leg was part of the running process, it tore free before the wolf could do any damage, and the wolf fell forward on its face. This gave Alexander a few more seconds to run. Trix was weak now, since blood was running through her fur. Foxfire was holding her cracked knuckles in her uncracked knuckles because she wasn't left-handed and couldn't throw a decent punch with it anyway. She hurried over to her fox, but the alpha hit her full force and knocked her onto her back. He stood on top of her with drool dripping down onto her face, and she could feel his hot breath as he opened his mouth and clamped down on her face. And that is where I will leave her. Chapter 13. How a Hill Saved His Life. He, who is Alexander, was knocked forward by the wolf on its second attempt to bite him. He kicked out with his shoes, but they were made of deer leather, if there are deer in Italy, and wolves, if there are wolves in Italy, eat deer all the time. So his shoes weren't doing a whole lot of damage. He got up to run again, but was knocked down. He kicked in vain, then got up again and was knocked down. But then, when he got up and tried to run again, he fell down a hill. It was still night, so he had terrible depth perception. But wolves often hunt at night, so it knew not to follow Alexander anymore. It returned to the rest of its pack. When Alexander landed at the bottom of the hill, he cursed. He used the D word in Italian. Chapter 14. Uncle Antoine. Upon collecting himself and traveling forward, Alexander found himself in another village, of the same state as his own. Of course, I refer to the state of poverty and not the state of being burnt to the ground. The first house he came upon appeared to belong to an old man sitting in his chair just outside the door. When he, who was the old man, saw the dry leaves and wet mud in his, which was Alexander's, hair and cuffs and collar, he let out a wheezy cackle, and it was such a genuine laugh of such great force that Alexander felt embarrassed and moved on. In the center of the village there was a statue. It honored a man who everyone had already forgotten, and there wasn't a name to remember him by. Alexander took a moment to appreciate this monument. Everyone has already forgotten him, a voice admitted behind him, and there isn't a name to remember him by. Alexander turned to find a rather large and pleasant-looking man with his hands stretched out, as if he was going to reach into Alexander's stomach, pull some of the stuff from inside of it, and put it back inside his own stomach. Handshaking didn't really feel appropriate to Alexander in that moment. Without a hint of embarrassment, the large man withdrew his hand and placed the tips of his sausage fingers on his chest. My name, which is very important, is Antoine Vivaleschi. Most men around these parts call me Uncle Antoine. Why uncle? Alexander asked. We are Protestants here, exclaimed Uncle Antoine, and since those heathen pickle-tickling Catholics call their faithless deceptors fathers, well, we decided to be uncles. He gave Alexander a suspicious eye, and I mean a look. You're not a Catholic, are you? Oh no, Uncle Antoine, said Alexander, who did not know what he was. That's wonderful, Uncle Antoine boomed. Then he showed Alexander what little left there was of the village. When they had passed by the old man's house, he was gone. But by then, the tour was over, and Alexander was beginning to feel hungry. Chapter 15. The Old Man and the Bottle. It was upon arriving to the inn that Alexander felt the weight of his knapsack had been lightened. When he checked its contents, he found that one of Pimple's elixirs was missing. For a moment, he chastised himself for being so careless. Surely, Pimples would require all three in the coming week. And then he remembered. Still, the bottle was important to him, and he regretted being so careless. It could have been the mushroom or the ring which was taken. Those things would have even passed unnoticed for much longer than an entire bottle. And heaven forbid that some thief out there was cured of his illness or became a slave. Inside the inn, there were many grown men and several grown women. Alexander had no interest in their affairs, so he found a dark corner where there was a small table. He wiped the cobwebs away and knew he wouldn't be disturbed. He then set his pack up against the wall, and he withdrew the few items he had left, just to make sure everything was still there. Besides the elixir, he accounted for everything. It was such a rare and interesting thing for Alexander to wonder where the elixir had gone, that it almost was a disappointment to look across the tavern room and spy it in the hands of the old man. When he was seen, the old man tipped Alexander a wink and went on sipping. It was almost a disappointment, but it was definitely an offense. He, who was Alexander, considered his 13 anniversaries and decided himself old enough to confront the thief. Puffing his chest up to look as big as possible, he crossed the room, walking around the men and women who were bumping into each other quite comfortably, and headed towards the bearded, scrawny, bald elder. At some point in crossing the room, he lost sight of the thief, and when the view was clear, the old man was gone again. Shocked, Alexander returned back to his seat, but then found his knapsack and all of its contents missing. Then he was disappointed. Like a rat, or maybe a boy, he scurried around the room looking for whatever was left of his gifts, but he found nothing. His mother's letter had been in that bag. The thief must have left the inn, so he went outside. It was becoming night again. He had spent much of the morning traveling to the village, and most of the day with Uncle Antoine, so now he was very tired. But he knew that if he rested, he would never find his bag again. He didn't have any rational reasons, and I'm not sure why intuition often works out for us, but I agree that he was probably right. I lost a wallet once on a train and decided to take a nap instead of looking for it. I awoke at my destination and never saw the wallet again. He heard the old man's cackle as he was passing by a pig farmer's slaughterhouse. He found the old man, more than a quarter of the way finished with the bottle, and he, who was the old man, was very happy too. At least, he was laughing more. "What a fine elixir this is," the old man commented to Alexander when he approached. "Did you make this?" "No," Alexander admitted. "Pimples did." And the old man spat out what was in his mouth and frowned. "Pimples was my guardian after my parents died," Alexander explained. "Oh," the old man said, taking another swig, "that's not bad at all." "No, it wasn't," considered Alexander. "Well," said the old man, "I like it." Alexander looked at him. He was an old man, and probably needed help sleeping. "I can give you the other 2 bottles." The old man's eyes brightened. "If you help me kill the king." "Okay," said the old man. "That sounds like a fair deal to me." And then they were friends.